Welcome everyone to the February 17th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. Let's begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Commissioner Vice Chair, would you want to lead us, please?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry about that, I blanked.
I'll give you a text next time. Sorry about that. Michelle, can we please have roll call?
John Marshall,
Here.
Peter Gower,
Here.
Mark Johnson,
Here.
Arthur Munoz,
Here.
Paul Levis is absent. Alex Felto is not here. Kathleen Taylor.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much. Moving on to item number 3, public comment. Michelle, do we have any public comment?
I did not receive any public comment for this item.
Okay, we will close public comment and move on to item number 4, approval of the minutes. The first item is 4.1, Reno City Planning Commission regular meeting minutes from the January 20th, 2021 meeting.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, move to approve the minutes from January 20th, 2021.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gower, I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 4.2, Reno City Planning Commission meeting minutes for the regular meeting on February 13th, 2021.
Madam Chair, I apologize. I got my meetings and minutes backwards. I actually need to abstain from the last one. I wasn't there, but I'll make a motion to approve the ones, February 13th ones.
Do we need somebody else to second the first ones?
Probably.
I second.
Okay.
Commissioner Marshall.
Do we have to go back and do a vote again, or is it good?
Messing everything up.
It's a,
I think
we're off to a
it's
good
okay if-
start.
I think it's okay if somebody makes a motion if they have to abstain. Angela,
Okay.
do you know?
Yeah, Jonathan, are you good with that?
Okay.
Yes.
So are we still doing February 3rd right now?
Yes, we have a motion, and I don't think we have a second. We have a motion by Commissioner Gower.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, I'll second for February 3rd.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Does anybody need to abstain?
I need to abstain. I was absent. Commissioner Marshall.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries with Commissioner Marshall abstaining. And we'll move on to item number 5. We are so excited. A presentation by Adam Searcy, Chief Facilities Management Officer of the Washoe County School District Facility Planning.
Just one moment while we move him in. Adam, are you
Thank
there?
Presentation out early too.
Hey,
Yes.
good evening, everybody. I think I just got into the party.
Welcome, Adam.
Thanks for having me. Pleased to be here, everybody. Good evening. Adam Searcy. I'm with the Facilities Department for the school district. I'll go ahead and share my screen. I've got a presentation queued up that hopefully most of you have received already. We'll just make sure, is everybody seeing my presentation screen right now?
Here.
Okay, so this is largely all public, well, it is all previously published information intended to be kind of a for this audience and any viewers, but really try and kind of prioritize the speed of my presentation in the interest of Q&A at the end. So anyway, kind of an overview of what I wanted to highlight. really about the progress that the school district has accomplished and where we're at today. Talk a little bit about how we go about planning for the future, and then an overview of really what our current plan is at this point. So, as I mentioned, since 2016 passage of the WC1 local sales tax dedicated to school construction, repair, and renewal, we've accomplished a great deal. We've opened 5 new schools during that time, and we have essentially 5 new schools either under construction or deep into planning, anticipated to open prior to August 2023. Also, particularly of note on this slide, associated rezoning, that's enrollment boundary rezoning, stemming from the additional capacity, leading to enrollment relief across dozens of existing schools. That comes into play oftentimes when we talk at some of the maybe urban infill type of development projects that come before the Planning Commission. That's part of how the school district is addressing future growth in these urban areas rather than building new schools there. So a lot of progress on those fronts, and continued investment in repair and renewal in our existing schools. All told, since the end of 2016, we have invested over $700 million to date in this community, in the public schools. It's very important for us to note that all of these expenditures are reviewed in public meetings by the School District Capital Funding Protection Committee, also by the School Board of Trustees, and recently completed a comprehensive third-party audit with 0 findings. All of these projects are publicly advertised and competitively awarded. So we're proud of the level of investments that we've been able to make, but even more proud of really the quality and the transparency with which we've been able to deliver that for the community. We've also been able to continue on this pace, meeting the needs of the community. It's really at this point still about relieving pent-up overcrowding. This is pre-existing demand that we've been accelerating our projects to relieve the existing enrollment and overcrowding demand. We've been met with favorable conditions both on the property tax front, the sales tax front, as well as ongoing interest rates well below what were originally forecasted. This is an excerpt from one of our most recent budget presentations to the School Board of Trustees. So positive news on the revenue side as well. I mentioned previously 5 major projects that are in the works, under construction, or deep into design as we speak. These are listed here. I wanted to note 4 of the 5 here are either within the city of Reno limits, or in the case of the new Proctor Hug High School, the majority of the enrollment zone is within Reno city limits. So some pretty heavy investments within Reno city limits to address current and future enrollment growth in all of these areas, all underway as we speak as well. So that's a really quick overview of where we are, but I wanted to shift for a moment and talk about how we plan. So I can't emphasize this document screenshot here enough. This is our recent updated facilities master plan. This is a 20-year plan that we composed and presented in conjunction with the updated regional master plan. So this was reviewed by Truckee Meadows Regional Planning, of course, also our Capital Funding Protection Committee and Washoe County School Board of Trustees in late 2019, early 2020, and really is a thorough and pretty easy to understand guide on where we see the next 20 years of school district facility needs heading. As you guys understand better than most, this is a plan, and it will be updated regularly as our annual capital improvement plans are updated. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I really like to take a moment to highlight this. It's on our website. Every time I get a chance, I kind of try and point to this document. I think it's a good document, but more importantly, it's much more valuable if other people are aware of it. I mean, more than anything, this is not only intended to guide our own organization, it's intended to inform the community of our intentions so that we might act in complement, or, in concert with one another. But a little bit more about how we plan. I think this is something that maybe we've talked about before with the Planning Commission. When we do receive impact reviews or development applications for review from the city staff, we're replying with an analysis that's primarily based on anticipated student generation, where these, housing units are currently zoned to be enrolled in, what the enrollment levels at those schools are, but how many students at which grade levels we expect this, 100 unit subdivision, single family residences to generate. We've talked about this before. It is based on historical trends that the school district sees. We have a robust, student data management system. We know where these kids are enrolled each year, where they were enrolled in last year, and we can track and develop, empirical trends as to how many second graders at, Veterans Elementary School historically turn into third graders at Veterans Elementary School versus Double Diamond Elementary School. That matriculation rate is not necessarily the same from school to school, as well as certain types of housing in certain regions of the district do not necessarily generate the same average number of students per capita. So we're annually updating those trend coefficients, if you will, and that's what informs our response to the Reno City staff on any of these development review impacts. But that's the behind the scenes. The image here is really merely just an extension of that data analysis. When we look at, as I said, annually update those student generation rates, we see some pretty compelling trends. And you guys are familiar with a lot of, I think, what might be driving these, but it's hard for anybody to put a finger on that. More so, it's what does it mean as far as school district facility demand. So anyway, some thoughts. Again, you're very familiar with these topics, but I wanted to touch on housing affordability. This is not an unfamiliar topic. Some data that you're very familiar with, but maybe this screenshot, it's more than a year old, but the takeaway still holds true. And I thought it was powerful illustration of, the affordability of various housing types and units versus the student generation that we see from those types of housing units. And that's not good or bad. That's not, I'm just here to try to illustrate mostly about how we respond to the impact letter requests. How do we go about planning for the impacts of the development? And this is a little bit of behind the curtain, the data we look at to develop our impact letter responses and develop our facility plans 1 and 20 years into the future. So we got housing rate or housing affordability issues in the community. You know all about that. It's a lesser known trend data point. We know how many first graders become second graders, or at least have a pretty good idea. We don't have a great reference point for how many kindergartners are going to show up next year. Now, everybody knows that 2020 has thrown everything up into the air, so that's got a bit of an asterisk on it. But there has been a longstanding, consistent, trending decrease birth rates. We actually look at total number of births to Washoe County resident mothers 5 years prior as an indicating metric as to how many kindergarten students to anticipate, in addition to 5-year trailing annual trends to see if we can piece together an expected increase or level or even a decrease in kindergarten enrollment. But your guess is, as good as mine as to origins of this trend, but it's not an anomaly. It's something we've been seeing as a trend for a long time in this community. The other factor that I think is noteworthy and that definitely continues to influence our facility planning efforts is the impacts of both charter schools and a little bit more on the forefront, distance learning. So these are actual numbers, again, public information related to total district-wide enrollment, as well as district-sponsored charter schools and state-sponsored charter schools. Again, the data in 2020, 2021 school year is skewed by COVID, but the trend is still relevant. You can see the dramatic growth over the last 10 years here in state-sponsored charter schools, and that does not look to reverse in the near future. This is something, it's a whole nother subject of discussion, but it's data that we carefully take into consideration in all of our facility planning conversations. The lesser well understood variable here that I wanted to at least touch on, I don't have a lot of data to discuss, is distance learning. Again, 2020, 2021 school year has taught all of us a million lessons, many of which were hard learned. But we were forced in many instances to adapt to a virtual education platform. For many students, that may have been a positive experience that they will look to continue in the future. And at the school district, we really want to serve the individual child and provide a variety of means and options for them to pursue their goals and learn in a way that best suits their strengths and weaknesses. I think distance learning, I know that the school district is investing in distance learning on a larger scale than we have before. That still allows students to enroll in Washoe County School District. It oftentimes still allows them to have either some sort of blended or hybrid in-person presence, but it does not have the same physical capacity, impact, or need relevant, analogous, the same as, if 100 kids want to go to an elementary school, they all need to be accounted for 5 days a week. So this is something that has totally skewed our reality this school year, but going forward, the planning is not that it will completely revert back to a fraction of the total enrollment that it once was, but really, probably in the mid-single digits of the total school district enrollment, students who may feel that distance learning is a better option for them. And we're excited about the opportunity to present that or offer that to our students, but it is something we're closely tracking from a facility standpoint on how that might influence us in the future. Okay, I wanted to touch a little bit, I specifically highlighted some of these major master plan communities, even specific within the city of Reno. Since WC1 passed, I feel like the school district has been able to participate more actively in conversations with all developers. I just singled out these 3 major projects in a very more proactive, healthy way. When we're coming in with master plan communities and the school district has the means to act on its needs, to respond to the enrollment demands that growth may initiate, that planning for that future school site and having that permanent revenue stream to be able to acquire that property or develop that property when it is warranted by enrollment growth has really been a positive thing. I mean, I don't think, you're on the planning commission for a reason. You appreciate good planning and development, and that's what this represents. We've been pleased to be at the table with these developers on multiple occasions, enter into formal agreements in multiple instances, all with ample flexibility. We all know that these projects change over time. Their timing ebbs and flows. And the school district, because of the capital funding stream that we have at this time, or now in perpetuity, we feel certain that we can meet the needs of future growth in a healthy time frame, and through planning. This is kind of really how it starts. So I wanted to touch on that briefly, and then flip back to this 20-year plan. This is an excerpt all from the 20-year facilities plan, or the school district's current facilities master plan. I won't read all of this to you, but hopefully this is large enough you guys can take a look at it. There's 100 more pages of good information in this plan, but this really summarizes it right here on what our current best thinking is on how we anticipate addressing future growth enrollment needs in certain areas of the school district. Some of these we have properties currently acquired and ready to build on when the demand materializes. Other areas is very nebulous. Long range, 10 plus years into the future, there's limited degree of specificity there. But this is our plan to address some of these areas of primary growth. I check marked there on the side. North Valleys, of course, Spanish Springs area, but also Southeast Reno, Damani Ranch, and again, as I mentioned, urban infill with the increased capacity made available through the rezoning, as well as some additions, existing school additions that we are executing currently or have scoped for possible future construction if and when needed. This is a little bit of a dated map, but I've always kind of liked the visual. Depicts most of the properties that we've acquired or have acquired or are in the process of developing or have developed. Gives you sort of an overview of the district. I'll note that elementary school at Northgate is no longer on the table. But really the conversation has shifted, and it's in the facilities plan, to some other options to be nimble and at the ready to meet the enrollment needs of really that McQueen vertical if and when additional capacity should be needed. And then, this is a little more dense to read, but really the takeaway here is that in addition to that 20-year facilities plan, we've got a 5-year capital improvement plan that gets published with our annual budget. It gets reviewed by the Capital Funding Protection Committee. This is more of a plan in nature. It's more granular, as you can see, with specific projects and specific dollar amounts. And then beyond that, we have an annual capital improvements plan, with most of these projects coming individually before the Board of Trustees for discussion and approvals. And then the annual capital renewal line item that you see here goes before the Capital Funding Protection Committee and the school board, really on an annual basis for review and approval. So as with any plan, it's continuously reviewed and updated, and really it's on the annual basis where we're presenting, here's exactly what we need approval for. Here's our current 5-year CIP. And if and when it needs, it dictates that the 20-year facilities plan be updated or adjusted. There's a process for that as well. So really in closing, I wanted to share this amazing drone footage from the Proctor Hug High School taken just weeks ago, looking back upon the city of Reno. But really the takeaways on this presentation, the investment impacts have been significant. We're grateful to our community and proud for so many partners who have helped achieve this, and feel the positive impacts are being felt far and wide across the entire district. But want to also really emphasize what I feel has been a healthy and thorough relationship with the agencies and the developers in this planning process. I joined the school district in 2016, so I can't necessarily speak firsthand to maybe what it has been like in the past, but I do feel like it's been strong since 2016. We've made very positive progress out in the field construction, but also in the planning, on the planning side of the process. And then that's, really part of my reason for me being here this evening. I wanted to also mention the funding outlook remains strong. And this is, we're we're putting a lot of work out there right now, as I said, largely on the basis of pent up demand. Depending on a lot of variables, COVID, in migration, like there's a lot of dynamic variables these days, but it's likely that the pace of new school construction will need or not need to continue at the same pace that it has been, that we've essentially caught up with overcrowding, and that we will be able to continue our robust investments in our existing schools, build new capacity when the growth materializes and warrants. But nevertheless, the funding stream through this pandemic has remained very positive, both sales tax and property tax, and then also interest rates for debt has been exceeding budget forecasts. So that's the takeaway. School district feels ready to meet future needs. I think it's something that's important to us to understand those needs, but also help reassure the community that we're prepared, we are preparing with our partners, and that we feel prepared to meet the needs of the future if and when those needs materialize. All right, so that's the end of my presentation. Again, kind of a plug for our website. It's got a lot of project specific information, our 20-year facilities plan, and try to refer people to that and just communicate what we're doing and how we do it. Thank you for your time. I'd love to open it up for any Q&A you guys might be in for. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Adam. And let's give it a second and bring it back to the commission. And commissioners, do we have questions or comments for Adam?
We
Anybody?
can start off.
Commissioner Marshall?
Can I say the pledge again? I feel like I need to restart and reset and,
We think you cut out.
that was it. Hey, Adam, thank you for the presentation. It was really good. And it's good to see the slides in advance. Thanks for that too. Can you talk a little bit about how the district looks at staffing facilities alongside the actual construction of facilities, and how the district plans for the ability not only to build schools, but to actually operate them?
Sure, absolutely. That's a question we've addressed a couple different ways in the past. At a high level, the teacher allocations follow the students. So when we talk about having overcrowded schools, we're basically redistributing those students in a less dense way. So there's teachers that we're teaching, 1,500 students at one school. It's not quite this, divisible, but now the same, half of those teachers are going with half of those students to a new school, right? On a macro level, that analysis holds up. In reality, a new school comes with a new principal, a new lead custodian, and a handful of new utility bills that creates additional, basically general fund overhead for the school district. Now, largely our school district's funding provided through the state is tied to enrollment. So it is a balance between the overhead associated with new facilities, whether it's personnel overhead or just facility upkeep and utility bills, and increased state revenue associated with increased total student enrollment. It's something that we work very closely with our business office. Knowing that we have a lot of, tools in our toolbox at times, building a new school not only is expensive from a capital construction standpoint, but it comes with those additional impacts. That's not always the most cost-effective solution, whether it's rezoning, portable classrooms in certain limited instances, existing school additions we have executed or are executing and have scoped to execute in other instances in the future, or a variety of other solutions that, maybe are a little more cost effective in the right circumstances. All those factors come into play, and then ultimately, combined with the needs of the classroom, to provide those students with the ideal learning experience.
So let me ask that another way. Is your facilities plan constrained by your ability to staff the facilities that you anticipate building? Or in other words, if you can't build it or if you can't staff it, would it be on your facilities plan?
Our facilities master plan is not that granular. There's not it's more on a 20-year planning level where we anticipate enrollment growth to exceed capacity, and where we anticipate new schools or capacity additions being needed. On an annual level or on a 5-year CIP level, that conversation comes into play with district administration, our CFO, our deputy superintendent. We're actively involved in the number of teacher allocations, the state school distributive account, and the legislation associated with that. It's an annual conversation, but ultimately we're putting forward proposals based on student demand, and it has not been an issue, or it has not influenced the ability to build or open a new school on the basis of being able to staff it. It's a real consideration. I know that's kind of a rambly response, but it's a real consideration. But it doesn't, I don't know how to say this, it doesn't wag the dog, I mean, it's not really the factor that makes or breaks, are we going to build these new schools if and when they're needed?
So in other words, the facility plan is not really expressly linked to the ability to staff it, because in the past, you haven't had staffing constraints, or you don't build a school unless you feel like you can staff it. What's the connection between the actual operation of the school and getting on the facilities plan?
How about this? The facilities plan is tied to enrollment, and enrollment, or district funding from the state is tied to enrollment. So we have increased enrollment. We need additional facilities to meet that need. We get additional revenues from the state associated with that enrollment that supplies the funding necessary to hire those teachers or those principals or those custodians or those general fund expenses.
Okay, I'll leave
It
that.
might not work out.
I got it.
I mean, on a macro level, that's how it boils down. Facility
Understood.
planning is tied to enrollment, so is general funding. Sometimes those two don't fully meet in the middle, but that's how it's supposed to work.
Okay.
And by and large, it does.
Have you, when you do your projections for future student enrollment, et cetera, does your modeling at all take into account how accurate your prior modeling was? So for a modeling exercise, do you look back at what we projected X number of students back in 2000, and that held or it didn't hold? So is there some feedback mechanism in your modeling, what you use to project forward your future enrollment, depending on your past projections?
Well, I mean, I would say that it's part art and part science, right? I mean, we've got empirical coefficients and historical trend lines that are a little bit more baked into the algorithm. I mean, when I say algorithm, there's sophisticated software that does this. We have really smart people who sit in cubicles on spreadsheets that actually turn out better work than some black box software. But anyway, it's the same underlying logic. But to your point, some of the information that I presented here, it's not necessarily baked into the algorithm. It's them going back, and all of us, I say them, I'm in these meetings trying to learn from, where we were right on the money, where we were high, where we were low, and why. And constantly, I don't want to say, adjusting our projections, but, trusting the algorithm, but putting that art into the projection aspect of things on really a continuous basis. I mean, it's annual, but we're diving into this data below the line, behind the numbers all the time to better understand why the trends went slightly different than what we projected. Again, it's not a simple numerical exercise, but I mean, these are human beings, so
Kind of like
they
traffic.
behave
analysis.
irrational. I mean, there's
that's
humans
okay, I don't-
driving cars doing crazy things. Yeah.
Just a final question. Do you have some figures for the amount of money that you're spending on new schools, new development versus infill improvements?
I don't know that I have a statistic for you offhand on that. I mentioned the total investment of 700 million to date. That includes about 150 million associated with capital renewal, like replacement of roofs and windows and carpets and things like that. When you talk about kind of urban infill investments, I want to note a couple of projects like the expansion of Swope Middle School, arguably even the expansion of Damani Ranch High School, an existing facility that we expanded recently. But also, I mentioned the rezoning impacts. We built a new middle school in Sun Valley, well, Desert Skies Middle School, and when that new school opens, Trainer Middle School and Dilworth Middle School see these tremendous enrollment decreases as those students are rezoned into the new school, and then they have sort of capacity to absorb overcrowding from their adjacent middle schools, or they have elementary schoolers, sixth graders who are in elementary schools who we are able to then bring up into middle school, creating a little bit of extra capacity in those elementary schools. That's how we've primarily addressed the capacity needs stemming from urban infill projects, rather than trying to build a new school in an urban infill setting, relieving through sort of the outreach or the domino impacts of the new school construction, creating capacity across the district.
So generally, it's been about 150 million out of the 700. Just ballpark.
No, I think that may have been confusing. 150 million is really about repair and reinvestment in our existing schools. That's like routine capital maintenance. You want to talk about capacity investments towards course urban infill needs?
I guess what I'm just trying to get some idea of, the Reno master plan, definitely is intending to try to encourage infill development over development at the fringes. And so I'm just trying to match up, the amount of expenditures the new schools that tend to be out where the new development is occurring versus improvements within the core, so that hopefully if our policies work, we'll see more growth coming within either McCarran Loop or within a reasonable proximity to it as a result of the master plan policies. And does that match up with the school district, facilities planning and the way that it's expending money?
Yeah, I'm gonna struggle to put a number on the answer to your question, but I'm telling you, it's astonishing sometimes how far-reaching the impacts of these new middle schools have been. The new middle school in Arrow Creek area, Marcy Hers, relieved O'Brien Middle School, which was then able to relieve a number of nearby elementary schools by bringing those sixth graders up to middle school, creating capacity at dozens of elementaries and middles as a result. Just these cascading impacts coming down into Reno from Sun Valley, up into Reno from Arrow Creek, all throughout kind of the Swope Reno vertical, all of those elementary schools, Hunter Lake, Jesse Beck, Roy Gom, will all see overcrowding relief in the 2022-2023 school year as a result of the expansion of Swope Middle School. So hard to put a finger on a dollar amount for you, but those three new middle schools, or two new middle schools with the expansion of Swope as a third, have probably touched somewhere in the neighborhood of 36 elementaries and middles within existing Reno, city of Reno.
Thank you. This last is just a comment. Angela, would you, I think it would be great if we could, if it's sometime in the future for the next facilities plan for the district, if that could come to the planning commission just for our review and input for whatever value that might have for the district, that could be a good, also a good addition to matching up the master plan with the district's facilities planning.
Yeah, and for anyone that sits on the Regional Planning Commission, the school district is one of the facility plans that is reviewed by regional planning as well.
Thank you.
Commissioners, other questions or comments for Adam?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, just a quick follow-up, Adam, on that. You've talked a lot tonight. We've got the the 5-year and the 20-year look ahead for essentially new school construction. Is there a similar plan for existing school, either modernization or kind of beyond just the warranty work or the repair work, like you mentioned with roofs and mechanical and carpet? Is there a plan? I guess I know there was before we got into the whole capital improvement side of things, but is there a plan, kind of to Commissioner Marshall's point, that gives you a 20-year look at what you're going to be anticipating for the existing facilities?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. It is something that we're working on right now. I guess I would say that it is not something that we've published at this point. Commissioner Johnson's probably familiar with, we referred to it as a revitalization program. We went into a number of existing schools and did more than just, replace carpet or replace worn out roofs. And that is something that we are hoping to be able to gain approval for and take public as a part of our 5-year CIP, as we believe we are now turning a corner, or turning a page, turning a chapter from a phase of relieving pre-existing pent-up overcrowding and now being able to be in more of a growth maintenance phase, building new capacity when it materializes and is needed, but with a permanent revenue stream, still having the ability to make robust investments into repair and renewal, and still possibly be able to embark on more of a district-wide revitalization 2.0 program, where we're going into schools, existing schools who do not have capacity issues, and addressing needs that are not, facility asset repair needs. So, some technology upgrades, modernization, fit and finish, they sometimes call it, really, like the term says, revitalizing those schools, rejuvenating those schools. It's something we're working on right now. We're probably a few years away from being past that 2023 milestone. Right now, we've got, I mean, we've got $100 million worth of projects out to bid as we speak. We're going to be running pretty hot through 2022, 2023, but it's on the 5-year horizon. We're planning for it. We haven't gained approval for it yet. We're not quite there, but it's where we see the next, I guess, chapter of WC1, post WC1 capital program going.
I appreciate that. And I think that's really, to Commissioner Marshall's point, what would be interesting to understand is just, you know, it's not so much, there's an equivalency there that, you know, a new elementary school has things that the existing ones don't. So there's a, you know, a desire to make sure that we're carrying everything forward. But I guess the second question I have is maybe one that has come before us on a couple of occasions where we have, I know you've mentioned you've worked with some of the larger planning areas and looked at that, but I know some of them have come to us where the developer has indicated a desire to fund either additions to, or, you know, added classrooms to existing schools, sort of independent of anything that the school district is doing. I don't know if any of that has come to fruition, or if that's anything that you've had discussions with some of these developers on, maybe in the near term. I guess I'm thinking sort of in the western regions of Reno, where the new elementary schools aren't planned for 8 to 10 years, but yet we've seen some pretty dynamic growth prior to that with some discussions about it. So I don't know if there's a mechanism in place, or if there have been discussions, or how the district sort of reacts to requests like that.
So, I mean, specific to West Reno, pre-WC1, there were 2 developments conditioned to make, one was conditioned to basically expand Verdi Elementary School for us, and one was conditioned to basically give us, I don't even remember, $500 for every unit that they close. It's kind of oddball one-off deals, and those have basically come to fruition. They're both signed deals that the developers have continued to honor. We get a check every quarter from one of them for however many units they've closed. And the other one, you know, ultimately it's demand based, right? So we're looking at our enrollment numbers, we're looking at our capacity numbers. And in the case of the expansion of Verdi Elementary School, Verdi, you know, it's a small school, but it's got plenty of capacity now and forecasted well into the future. So we negotiated a payment in lieu. You know, it was really in nobody's best interest to have them expanding a school when it wasn't necessary, and it wasn't a good fit for either party. But they made good on that condition, and we've set those funds aside, dedicated exclusively, in that case, to Verdi Elementary School. You know, those are 2 very specific examples. I don't know that we've had quite the same offer or conversations with other developers. I mean, we've done deals a variety of ways, in a variety of circumstances. So we're always looking out for the best interests of the school district, but most interested in planning the facility in a way that is healthy for everybody.
I think that was, I appreciate that. I think that was sort of the way we were seeing it, but I just wanted to follow up on that. So appreciate that, Adam. Madam Chair, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Other commissioners? I don't see any other hands. Adam, thank you so much for being here. Sounds like you're super busy. Come back and see us soon.
Anytime. Thanks, you guys. Have a good evening.
You too. Okay, we'll give it a second and then we'll move on to agenda item number 6.
We are moving the people in. Can you move? Hang on just a second.
Okay.
John Kropotic isn't. Is he there? John, are you there? John Kropotic, can you hear us?
Are we good?
I see you and I hear you. Yay.
Oh,
Excellent.
Yay.
Audio's
Good
okay.
job.
Am I
okay.
sharing screen?
Yes.
Move on to item 6.1. This is case number LDC 21-00014, Riverbend Power Line relocation. This is a request for special permits to allow relocation of an overhead 120 kilovolt power line and development adjacent to residential zoning. And it looks like we have a presentation from the applicant ready to go.
John, you have 15 minutes to do your presentation, so you can start anytime.
Is that directed at me, Michelle?
Yes,
Or
sir.
the applicant team? Is that what you said?
That's
Okay,
for
thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Mhm.
Can you see my PowerPoint okay, commissioners? Everything's good, audio, video, perfect. Thank you. It's worth an ask, given some history here. Good evening, commissioners. John Kropotic, KLS Planning. I am working with and representing Rob Fitzgerald. You guys all know Rob. In this case, he is the owner and applicant and developer of the Riverbend Mobile Home Park. And then also with us in the Zoom meeting is Jason Gillis with Tech Engineering. So this is a relocation of a SUP request relocation for 120 kV overhead power line and for development adjacent to residential zoning. The purpose of this is that the line does run, bisects basically right through the middle of the site, and that we are requesting that it be relocated to the perimeter. There's the zoning. You can see the residential. You probably get a sense of the general alignment and the relationship of one property to the other, but you can see the single family 6 and then the CC zone, both of which are part of the application. There's the simplest way for me to describe what's going on here. The blue line is the existing 120 kV corridor. You know, we're saying relocation, but I think an important point for the commission to know is that it is in fact a request for relocation, but also it's a combination of corridors. It's important to know that in managing visual clutter. So we are requesting it go along the 120, the alignment in green, but it is also combined with an existing power line in that alignment. Another thing I would point out to you, can you see my cursor on the screen? You can see it, okay. So you see that pole right there. There was a letter that I presume that each of the commissioners got of a gentleman who lives in the Glen Meadows Village subdivision over here. And he thought that we were changing something on that property. That is not the case. There is a new power pole that is on the applicant property, which would be the first one, the one that sits on the Glen Meadows property. Nothing will be done with it. So basically it reroutes and then connects to the pole over in the mobile home park here on the east side of the site is the idea. There's the civil engineering version of the same plan, more detail if you had any questions at a future time. Nothing really different other than, again, more engineering detail. Does define the width of the corridor. I wanted to share this with the commission. I know how much you guys tend to appreciate some of the technical things. Staff brought it up in the planning, in the staff report, something about a drainage way that traverses the site. So if you look at the one on the east, this is with our team. We looked at the city drainage way map, overlaid it into our corridor as best we can. And what staff was pointing to is this proposed pole location here. It will not interfere with the drainage way. We're not going to put it in one. This is a drainage way that feathers out. We have some flexibility in location of the poles when this is done with precision. I mean, we're in conceptual planning and conceptual engineering mode at this stage. And so I just point that out to you that that you do have that drainage way that comes through, crosses the highway, drains into the site, and then there's somewhere proximate to it is the power pole. We do not see it as a conflict. We can manage it in final design, but I just wanted to share that with you by a way of disclosure. The other drainage way, which is across the street, we have it noted there, major drainage way offsite. It drains through that Glen Meadows property, their open space, their common area, and directly into the Truckee River. City drainage way map here, different depiction of it that actually shows the, the blue is a flood zone associated with the river and those FEMA designations. But again, the one drainage way is what we're trying to illustrate here on the east side of the property, again, of which we will manage in final design to avoid conflicts. I think this is our best way to represent a visual impact, as staff did a fine job in analyzing the project, as you know, and called out key issues. Really, it's about, in their assessment, visual impact. So what we did is these photo simulations, if you could just make a mental note of those three locations. The first one is facing east, and I'm going to show you before and after, or existing and proposed for each of those. So the next one I'm going to show you is facing east from Highway 40. The next one is like from the middle of the site facing west. And then again, the third one will be facing east a little further down the road by the roundabout. It's our trying to represent, quite frankly, the worst case condition so you see the real what it will be. Photo sim number one, notice the existing pole. So you're approaching the site. I'll go back to the map. You see that site that's just past the arrow on the right. Okay, so there is that pole and there is the proposed new pole. You get an idea of what's going on there. That's one, and existing and proposed. On two, we're further down the road now to the east, but and facing west. I mentioned it was looking, you can see the portion of the mountain range to the west. There's the existing condition. Look at the poles there, same alignment, same corridor. There is the proposed. Existing and proposed. View number two. The third one is, again, going back to the west side of the site, facing the opposite direction. We're at the roundabout. That's a notorious reference point. Again, existing condition, you see the power poles, and then there is the proposed. Existing and proposed. So that is my brief presentation, Madam Chair. And we have the team here ready for any questions, comments Commission might have. Thank you.
Great, thank you, John. Do we have a presentation, I think, from Nathan?
We do. John, could you take your presentation down, please?
I'd be glad to.
Thank you. Nathan, are you ready to go?
I sure am. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, Nathan Gilbert, Associate Planner. John outlined the request for special use permits to relocate an overhead 120 kilovolt power line, which is considered a major utility, and to allow development adjacent to residential zoning. Staff does recommend approval with recommended conditions, specifically condition number 4, related to a single pole design consistent with the project material. John just showed you the renderings. That would be one of the single pole designs. The exception of one 3-pole product permitted on the interior of the easternmost parcel in consultation with NB Energy. That 3-pole design on the interior site, not really visible from the road, would be necessary to facilitate this. And condition number 5, requiring final engineered site plan showing exact delineations of any adjacent major drainage ways in relation to improvements. Staff looked at mapping from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It would appear there may be one, or there's certainly one, there may be two, but condition number 5 requires that any final site plan be certified by a licensed engineer to illustrate the parameters of any potential major drainage ways on the site and ensure that no disturbance occurs. If disturbance is necessary of a major drainage way, an additional special use permit would be required. This is a project of regional significance, and it does require a regional plan amendment to modify location of a regional utility corridor. So if the Planning Commission were to approve this special use permit request, the next step would be taking this to the City Council. City Council would have to initiate sponsorship of a regional plan amendment of that utility corridor. Additionally, Regional Planning Commission and Regional Governing Board would be required to review and approve both the project of regional significance and the amendment to the mapped regional utility corridor. With that, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Nathan. Let's bring it back to the Commission for Disclosures, and we'll start with Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Johnson, I have previously visited the site and received and read, I believe, a couple of emails. Thank you.
Commissioner Munoz?
Same disclosures.
Commissioner Marshall?
Same disclosures.
Commissioner Bell?
Actually, I'm sorry. I forgot one. I also discussed the matter with PC, or excuse me, the representative of the Utilities Commission.
Okay, Commissioner Velto?
Same disclosures, other than I did not discuss the matter with someone from the Utilities Commission.
Commissioner Gower?
Familiar with the site and received and read communication.
And Commissioner Taylor, same disclosures. Michelle, do we have any public comment for this item?
We received one comment from NV Energy that was forwarded to the commission and is part of the record. We did not receive any other public comment or voicemails.
Okay, thank you. We will close public comment and bring it to the commission for questions or comments of the applicant or Nathan. Who would like to start us off? Any questions or comments?
Well, I was trying to defer to my fellow council members, commission members, excuse me. But I do. John, I'm a little confused about the applicant is the developer because they are proposing to move the line, otherwise the line would remain in place. Is that correct?
That is correct. Mr. Fitzgerald, you're asking about?
Yes, I mean, this isn't a Nevada NV Energy led application because
it's not NV Energy led. If I understood you correctly, NV Energy has to do it's obviously their ownership of the line, right? And so this applicant pays for the design and the construction to relocate it per their standards. So we've been working with their electrical engineer and land use team to on the design.
Why do they want to relocate?
He's preparing the property for future development. Right now, it runs dab smack in the middle of the property. And I mean, if you look at how big of swath it takes through flat land, it really, and there's more to it than that, just the raw acreage hit, but also the way it visually impacts that property. It's a beautiful property with a park-like setting adjacent to the river. And
so,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, so it's for redevelopment purposes, and it looks like there's going to be a substantial benefit to your client from the relocation.
I would hope to the community, yes. I mean, I think there has to be some value in the combination of the corridors in terms of visual clutter. I think it's a valid planning issue.
Okay, I don't have any more questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Marshall.
Commissioners, other questions?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, just as a quick follow-up on that, John or Nathan, what is the actual required setback or easement prohibiting development around a line of this voltage?
Reno, this is Nathan Gilbert for the record. Reno Municipal Code for 120 kilovolt has a 150-foot separation from the corridor. from the footprint of a residential structure.
Okay, so that, and just to be clear, that's centered on the line. So you're 75 feet either side of that line for the closest development on the same parcel.
That's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted that clarified.
Commissioner Gower?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a clarifying question, going back to Commissioner Marshall's comment. John and Nathan, it's my understanding, based on your answer, John, that the applicant is paying for the design and the construction, so essentially bearing all the costs of relocating the line, and any benefit that would be received for the property is at the owner's expense. So we're not talking about any sort of an issue like with the PUC here with the distribution of costs to ratepayers, right? It's all being borne by the applicant in this case. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct in my understanding. We have a discovery similar to like a Tumwa discovery. They show the conceptual design, lay out a cost estimate. At some point, he has to go either write the check or get the financing to do it.
Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you. Appreciate the question.
Commissioners, other questions or possible motion?
Can we have a moment for discussion?
Commissioners, discussion?
Thank you. I appreciate your clarification, Commissioner Gower. But the way that I view what's happening here is the developer is essentially relocating a power line to what I consider to be one of my favorite stretches of road. It's taken a lot of hits lately because of the development, but in terms of a recreational opportunity for the community, it is probably one of the most heavily used bike routes that we have for recreational cyclists. And so what's happening is that this developer, in order to maximize the profit with his lot and his parcel, which is, more power to you, is to move the power lines onto the right adjacent to the public right-of-way or to Old 40. And that is imposing a cost on the public that the developer is not bearing. They're bearing the cost of moving the line, so it allows them to realize a greater profit from their property. And so the question is should that be, why are we allowing the increase on, and from my perspective, it is a significant increase in terms of the interference with views from that route. We do a lot of this up at the lake, and going from, a smaller power line to a larger, more complex power line is a significant impact. And so, I asked the question, I think you all saw, is what are the undergrounding possibilities? NV Energy obviously is not going to bear the cost of undergrounding because it's not their line, but there are programs that the PUCN has that can benefit an undergrounding opportunity. And in particular here, that we also have a developer who is seeking to benefit from the moving of the transmission lines. So I see this as an opportunity for us to avoid the circumstance where the public is bearing some of the burden here to allow the developer to realize profit. So my perspective, at least, is that this should be that the scenic situation should, at a minimum, remain the same, and if it is possible for us to use public monies with the support of the cities to try to underground, that would be the benefit, definitely a win-win for everybody. My thoughts for the commission to consider.
Commissioner Velto?
Commissioner Marshall, can you talk to me about which finding that directly applies to and why you're unable to make that finding based on your analysis?
Well, Commissioner Velto, you put me to it. I've looked through the master plan, and really in most of these, it's really both finding B and I think there is a general environmental F that would apply, that it is increasing, in particular F, increasing the scenic impact of the situation on the ground. I hope those help. I see Jonathan has his hand up.
No, I don't. I'm sorry. The button's got hit inadvertently. My bad.
But your lights work.
Could the applicant possibly weigh in on Commissioner Marshall's concern?
Thank you very much, Commissioner Velto. I appreciate that. Not the finding part, but about the visual impact, right? I think there's 2 points I would hope every one of us would respect on this visual impact issue. Yes, we are relocating the corridor, but it's along an existing corridor. So the fact that we are replacing one pole with another and eliminating a corridor should be of some benefit. The other is that I failed to mention in my opening comments is that we have an H-frame structure. Those are the most intensive, not the most intensive. You see those giant ones that look like men carrying buckets of water that traverse open space across the country, those giant ones. With exception of that, in this particular region, we have an H-frame that's going through today. So there's a lot more visual impact with that particular apparatus than there is with the single pole, which will now be combined and replacing the other single pole. That's my best response to Commissioner Marshall's comment.
If I may respond just quickly, if you notice on the routing, the H-frame goes through the parcel and crosses across the roadway. It doesn't parallel the roadway, right alongside the roadway. And it would be, John, that's a good point. It may be that I don't know what the net result is of taking away those crossing lines versus a line that runs parallel to the roadway. But we don't have that in front of us. So, I just look at what's in the application packet and what
Yeah.
Commissioner Velto, did you have some more discussion?
Yeah, I guess I struggle with applying finding F to kind of an environmental aesthetic. I see finding F as being more kind of like harmful to the environment, to something that's tangible, and finding E kind of outlining what kind of aesthetic we should be concerned about when it tells us to look to scale, density, height, other things that are in the code. I guess why for the other commissioners should we consider the kind of appearance of it under finding F if it's permitted under the other findings?
I'd be happy to respond to that if you'd like, if I may.
I would love that, please. Thank you.
Yeah. General aesthetics and scenic quality is in fact a recognized environmental impact, both through standard environmental, National Environmental Policy Act or the various environmental quality acts that states have enacted. Scenic quality is an environmental impact. Environmental impact doesn't have to be necessarily an impact to human health or, something that, but it is an impact to the environment that we experience. So, lots and lots and lots of agencies have beautification programs, et cetera, that one of the issues is undergrounding or reduction of power lines and the clutter that they create. So it's not, we're not breaking new ground here. This is squarely in the middle of an environmental considerations.
Isn't there an existing power line there now?
Yes. So what is
Yes.
happening, this would be an increase over that existing power line.
See, I guess that's where I'm having a hard time not making that finding because there's already a power line there. But commissioners, other discussion?
Madam Chair, I feel like I want to weigh in here. I completely understand where Commissioner Marshall's coming from, and I fully understand the aesthetics issue. Actually did my master's degree on aesthetic impacts and how they're analyzed. So I get that. I do also consider finding F to cover that type of impact, and I think that we've applied that in such a way, or at least I have, looking at that finding in the past. I do recognize that it is also a heavily used cycling route. I mean, I ride it all the time. I also recognize that there is an existing power line in this location where it's proposed to be relocated. And thinking about, I know we're not a regional planning, we're at the city, but regional planning policy and a lot of the sort of federal policies that look at utility corridors attempt to consolidate energy infrastructure into a single corridor. And a lot of times they seek to align it with existing right-of-ways, roadways, railroad, corridors, existing power lines, things like that. So when I look at this, I see it as a consolidation of the infrastructure and sort of a net improvement, really, in the overall amount of infrastructure that's on the landscape. And I think that the benefit really varies based on your point of view. And without having, John provided some photo simulations, and I thought that, the sort of the difference was pretty minor aesthetically between those. But, looking at it at that plan view, it really does appear to be a consolidation. So, based on that sort of internal analysis in my mind, and while I appreciate the discussion and Commissioner Marshall bringing that up, I am able to make all of those findings, including finding F.
Good discussion, Commissioner Gower. And all commissioners. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also appreciate the discussion. I guess to Commissioner Marshall's point, just looking at it, that there is an existing line there. And I agree with both Chair Taylor and Commissioner Gower talking about that. But I will say, just in looking at it, the eastern portion of the site, there is no power line at that point. This is definitely an intensification. It runs the power line further along the site as a part of what's happening there. So to Commissioner Marshall's point, it is definitely an intensification along the eastern edge of the site. I guess the part that I'm circling back to, and I guess going with the comment that I had, there's a utility corridor that essentially makes this section of this property not really viable for much development. And not that we're responsible at the Planning Commission for making somebody's parcel more developable, but I do understand the thought that's coming through here in terms of that. So I'm trying to look at this as a way to sort of balance the two out. So I appreciated the question from Commissioner Velto about the findings. I don't have the same issue with the master plan finding that Commissioner Marshall does, although I appreciate him bringing it up. So I think it is really just a question of whether or not the specific language in the finding about whether or not, it does not create adverse environmental impacts. I don't believe this creates adverse environmental impacts. I believe there's potentially some intensification along part of it. So that's the discussion that I appreciate us having. At this point and kind of going into it, I don't feel like the added portion of line is an impediment to me to make that finding, but I am definitely looking at that based on this discussion to try to understand what we're looking at here. So again, thanks for the discussion and the input from everybody.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Other commissioners? Commissioner Munoz?
Madam Chair, I'm ready to make a motion if you want to entertain one.
I think we had, everybody had a chance to chime in on discussion. That'd be fantastic, Commissioner Munoz.
Okay, the case of LDC 21-00014, the Riverbend Power Line relocation. Based on compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the SUP subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, and I can make all the findings.
Thank you, Commissioner Munoz. Do we have a second?
Gower, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Okay, Michelle, can you please take a vote?
Yes. Kathleen Taylor?
Yes.
John Marshall?
No.
Peter Gower?
Yes.
Mark Johnson?
Yes.
Arthur Munoz?
Yes.
Paul Levis is absent. Alex Velto?
Yes.
Okay, it's approved. 5-1, one absent.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, John. Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
very much. Excellent discussion. Thank you.
Okay, we'll give it a second. Moving on to item number 7, Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Liaison Report.
Madam Chair, there has been no meeting since our last meeting. We have one scheduled for next Thursday, the 25th.
Great, thank you. Angela, item number 8, staff announcements.
Hi, good evening. For the record, Angela Foose, Acting CD Director. From our last meeting, we've had one city council meeting. There were 2 big planning cases. One was the Echo Avenue zone change and master plan amendment. This came before Planning Commission in 2018, so it was well over 2 years ago. The applicant had proposed to put it on hold, and so they have since brought it back. It went to City Council, and City Council approved both the master plan and the zone change. That was that triangular parcel out off of Stead and Echo Boulevard. For those of you that were around back then, I was the applicant's representative. So I remember the project if you don't. Planning Commission had recommended approval of the master plan amendment and denial of the zone change. They were requesting a change to go from a public facility zoning to a MF30 zoning, and Planning Commission at that time felt that that density was too dense. The other case that was heard by City Council was the Canyons PUD. That's the one that is up near the D in the Damani area. And Planning Commission had recommended approval of the PUD. That also included a special use permit and a tentative map. That went before City Council. We had about 2 hours of discussion. A lot of the discussion was focused on feral horses and requirements for fencing the horses out, protecting some of the canyons and drainage ways, and also the grading of the roadway, making sure that the horses had the ability to get around the project without having to go around the mountain, so to speak. That project is actually going to be rescheduled for a first hearing in front of City Council, so that will be back in front of City Council in a couple of weeks. And that will be processed as both the planned unit development with the tentative map and special use permit. When it initially went to City Council, it was just for the planned unit development. As staff, we've since gotten back and realized that our code specifically says if a project is bundled as one package, meaning the PUD was bundled with the tentative map and special use permit, that it has to be bundled all the way through the approval process. So we are going to go back to City Council and have that heard again and follow up on that. Outside of the City Council meeting, I did want to express that we will miss Commissioner Olivas. You all saw the email that he will be resigning from his position as a planning commissioner. I think we will probably have another meeting, maybe 2 meetings, where we won't have a commissioner. We will try and get a new appointment scheduled for City Council in March. So likely you'll have, like I said, probably 1, maybe 2 meetings where we don't have his position filled. We will definitely miss him. So definitely reach out to him and let him know that you appreciated him, and we'll have him come back if we can, at least to give him his what do we call it, his certificate of appreciation, or whatever the right terminology is, kind of our final farewell to him. He served for a number of years, so he will definitely be missed, and his knowledge will definitely be missed as well. And that's all I had.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Item number 9, Commissioner's suggestion for future agenda items. Okay, item number 10, Michelle, public comment. Do we have any public comment?
I did not receive any public comment for this item.
Great, thank you. We'll close public comment. Item number 11, adjournment.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.